Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the IISS this afternoon. We have with us today Mr. Amer Hashmi, who is the advisor to the National University of Science and Technology in Pakistan, and is also the president and senior fellow of the National University of Sciences and Technologies Global Think Tank Network. Amer is the Secretary General as well of the university's Corporate Advisory Council, which is a top-line industry academia collaboration initiative. Mr. Hashmi is here today to talk to us about Pakistan fostering regional cooperation and stability, which is the title of his talk. He has kindly agreed to speak for about 25 minutes, which will then be followed by a Q&A session. And with these words, I'd like to straight away turn over to Mr. Hashmi for his remarks, which will be followed by a question-answer session, a discussion session. Amer.
Thank you, Rahul, for the introduction. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think because it's a special month for Pakistanis and particularly all Muslims, I will also start with our Arabic greeting of Assalamu alaikum. It links into my message today of peace and stability that Pakistan fosters. It just means may God's blessings be on all of you. So I'd like to start with that as an introduction. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank the International Institute of Strategic Studies for inviting us. In Pakistan, we hold it in high esteem. It has a long history. And I think it's doing a very solid and collaborative research with all its affiliations around the world. And the NUS Global Think Tank is very appreciative of its initiative to invite us over here. And we look forward to collaboration in the future. As recently we had one of your directors visit us a couple of months ago, Mark Fitzpatrick. And we had very good dialogue with some of our senior fellows. So thank you very much for the invitation. The topic is quite broad and it's complex. And before I start in the details, I'd like to mention the input that I did do and some of the research that my team did collect. We basically got input from the 6 power corridors of the country, namely the senior leadership of the political parties, I'll mention. I did meet the military leadership as well. I met the civil bureaucracy. And interesting as well is the industrial and corporate elite of Pakistan, which obviously have a monopolized stake in our business ventures. I also did meet the judiciary. And I call it, well, someone may disagree, the new power corridor, and Karen may be more akin to it, the media. We do also now call it a power corridor in Pakistan as they sway heavy influence in our country that didn't exist about 15 years ago. So with this, I'm going to share the research that came from them, some of their thoughts, but the analysis is of our own, personally myself. And therefore, I'm going to just share a lot of data with you instead of having a dialogue. And I think, as Rahul suggests, we'll have the Q&A afterwards. So I'm kind of going to be reading at a little fast pace because there's a lot to cover. I'll start with the topic itself and Pakistan's stance. And Pakistan, unfortunately, is not perceived as a contributor to regional peace, cooperation, and stability. This is despite the fact that, amongst other things in Pakistan, is the largest troop contributing country to the UN peacekeeping missions around the world. And I did a bit of research on that before I came today. We actually have 53 years of experience, contributing 150,000 troops to 41 UN missions in 23 countries. And that was our data. I wanted to see what the UN had to say about it. So I did bring a quote, which I'll distribute later. Rahul can do it. This is from Ban Ki-moon on April 2011. The UN has 100,000 peacekeepers deployed around the world. 1 in 10 is a Pakistani. The numbers tell only part of the story. The other part is played in the lives of people recovering from war, women who are treated by female members of Pakistan's medical unit, children who play football on fields constructed by Pakistani troops, civilians who are able to live in peace thanks to the stabilizing presence of these brave Pakistanis, Pakistani forces are dedicated not only to keeping the peace, but to keep alive the values and goals of the UN all over the world. So it tells you strategically from the government and our society where our priorities lie. Right? I think that's a good beginning to share other elements that I see as a progressive Pakistan now. Most analysis on the country portray an image of chaos and destruction. I'd say that it would be incorrect to deny that there's various challenges, but equally incorrect to define and look at the country in terms of conflict alone. There's a lot of positive happening. I've been back in the country for 10 years in every power corridor interacting with them, and I actually, and a lot of us feel that sentiment. There's a new progressive Pakistan emerging from all of this. While multiple crises are confronted by Pakistan, yet most of them are those which are really faced by developing countries, and some may well present even in developed world. Insurgencies of one sort or the other have affected the country after countries in developing world also see some of these issues happening. On the other hand, law and order, terrorism, obviously not equitable distribution of resources are not new even to the advanced countries of the world. Therefore, Pakistan is not an exception in terms of the crisis it faces. We firmly believe that Pakistan, together with countries in the South Asian region, can enhance peace, stability, and prosperity in South Asia. And there's a bit of evidence I'll provide for that and some solutions that we'll discuss. Despite the challenges of today's Pakistan, we see renewed justice, and reconstruction amidst conflict and chaos. The situation is not entirely that of Pakistan's own making. Pakistan has been a major American non-NATO ally in the so-called global war on terrorism, which is proof about the country's role towards regional and global peace. Islamabad has consistently called for fostering regional stability and cooperation with regards to rebuilding Afghanistan and ensuring peaceful transition of power once the international security assistance draws down its military presence this year. Pakistan is engaged in a determined fight against coordinated and organized terrorism on its soil, which has inflicted terrible losses on the country and its people. We have entered now recently a decisive phase in this fight once the military surged the anti-terror military operation in North Waziristan. The nation is determined, united, and firmly supports the military despite some minor voices that emerged during the negotiations and continue to emerge. Even with those sections of society and politics that have repeatedly emphasized the importance of peace through negotiations, they have not ruled out a military response to terrorism. It can be said that political differences on how to deal with terrorism are framed by greater national consensus and the advice of combating terrorism with the military instrument. Pakistan's contribution to the war against terrorism as a frontline state has a dual effect on the state and on its people. While the shortcomings and failings in the state apparatus and modes of governance were exposed on one hand, the crucible of terrorism has also shown that Pakistanis are resilient people and that there is a very strong bond between the state and society. This bond in times of national emergency and crisis has been exhibited recently when the military took on a secondary phase of the operation, which is a transition. We cannot put a cost on the human suffering in fighting terrorism, but some well-known estimates in terms of spending and indirect costs are worth mentioning. We just did this recently because the last 12 years we had figured about $70 billion was the cost, but a recent calculation, including the loss of lives, damage to the economy, have estimated about $102 billion. And this includes the sort of infrastructure destruction that takes place. The country has been able to sustain this huge cost and price of its war against terrorism in large part due to the resilience of its society and people combined with state-society cooperation. Reminds of what Brzezinski calls in his book Strategic Vision, America and the Crisis of Global Power. He mentions capacity for reactive mobilization of the American people and society in face of great danger to the security of the U.S. although we don't market that as such, but Pakistan has very similar feelings about that. Similarly, the resilience of the Pakistani people and state will help us defeat terrorism. And history has proven that. In numbers, we will be sharing later with IIS. We're going to give you detailed numbers on the factions. There's actually, out of, let's say, an average of about 195, 200 million people, how many are supporting this ideology of extremism. So we'll be doing a lot of research on that as well. This resilience has been timely reinforced by the role of international financial institutes, the World Bank, USAID, Japanese donors, AFID, etc., as well as the Friends of Pakistan. Pakistan's war against terrorism has focused not only on eradicating terrorism from Pakistan, but equally importantly, making the region free from terrorism so that the people of Pakistan, including the publics of various countries in the region, can live in peace. I would go even as far as to state that the region as a whole has been the greatest beneficiary of Pakistan's fight against terrorism, as this war has severely dented the capability of terrorism to become a formidable roaming regional menace. It is a welcome step in this regard that Pakistan and Afghanistan may also develop bilateral security arrangement to deal with this problem of terrorism, forging cooperation around the elements of national power, military, economic, political, cultural, moral, diplomatic, resource-based, industrial, geographic, can be a solid way of ensuring peace and stability in South Asia. There is actually an overall desire for peace in the region. India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan understand the interconnected nature of conflict and peace now more than ever. Peace with dignity, honor, and justice will prove to be the biggest driver for regional development. What shall further promote the efforts for peace in the region insofar as Pakistan is concerned is an interesting outcome of Pakistan's war against terrorism. This outcome is a groundswell in Pakistani public opinion resonating with the all across the social strata that is increasingly calling for strong and lasting civil-military alliance in the country, which could result in stronger relationships overall. If properly negotiated by concerned parties, this civil-military alliance could provide a strong foundation to accelerated socio-economic development of the country. I'll provide a bit of evidence of this in my talks with both the civil and military leadership, in which both of them shared. This is a very important aspect. Right now, these days, in international newspapers, we're hearing that the military is getting impatient, so I wanted to see what's happening on the civil side and including the military side. A very clear message that they allowed me to speak on their behalf, that they are fully supportive of democracy. They have taken a back seat. And the evidence of this, that we really said, do they meet their words, is the smooth transition of the democratic system. Right? It's hurt us economically, it's hurt us on the terrorist front as well, but the military took about a year and kept back until they requested the civilian government to again relook at really pushing the agenda of fighting the terrorists. Right? So it held back for about a year, it didn't take the decision on itself. The military now has also shared that they've been involved only as an assisting role for institution strengthening. So, as an example, the military has a very strong engineering wing. They're helping the IDPs that have been displaced. They're building roads. They're building bridges. They're even involved in one of our main highways called the motorway. The military also helps in natural disasters, right? And its doctrine right now, which I would actually label it, is to provide state building institutions full assistance where they have capacity. So where there's deficiency, the military will come for aid. But as far as any idea of coming into power, I firmly believe they've actually now internally realized that this is not the solution for a progressive Pakistan. The smooth and political transition in Pakistan speaks volumes of the political maturity of the people and political parties of the country. Although in the international media you'll see a lot of dissident voices, there's a maturity even taking place in the political system, which I may be able to expand on in the Q&A section. Despite the political activism and oppositional debates, there's fundamental consensus on the continuity of the democratic system of governance, with major changes in the way the system has been put together and functioned previously. The realization of the need for major electoral reforms by all political parties, big or small, national or provincial, is a positive indication for the desire about concrete changes in the political and electoral system. Combined with a new civil-military alliance, democratic continuity and far-reaching electoral reforms will benefit both Pakistan and yield major positive externalities for the region as a whole in terms of increased peace and multi-dimensional cooperation. Just give you a very quick example of how this last election turned out. I'm a dual national, I'm Canadian and Pakistani. I have not voted in either country. This last election, I actually physically went out, although I was out of the country, and came back to vote. And my extended family, about 30 people who were abroad from London to New York to Australia, flew back just to vote this time. And I was interviewing, and they're all younger than me. It was very interesting on the sentiments they had about having the right to vote, and their vote will actually be heard this time. So this is a big change from previous elections that took place in Pakistan. The positive trends are the fruits of the democratic situation of the country. Estimate indicate the population of Pakistan could be as high as 195 million people. I'll give that a caveat with about 5% variance plus minus. We haven't had a consensus, I think, since 1998 or 1999. And again, the military has to help on that. The civilian government will be asking the military. It's just very difficult to do in a country like Pakistan. Of this, if you look at even a 200 number, more than 55% of Pakistanis are under the age of 24. It's a very, very important stat. At least 6 out of 10 Pakistanis are either 40 or less. Young female population for the same group is about 50%. So we've got a large female population, and I'm pleased to share with you that our university's business school, which is ranked 3rd in the country, the valedictorians and in fact the gold medalists that come in the top 20 are females. So NUS Business School is doing extremely well and promoting women to come into the workplace. Nearly half of the total registered vote, which were 84 million, prior to the general elections of Pakistan in 2013 were between 18 to 35. Right? So that's also an important number. It gives an example of just my family network that I shared. Combined with this democratic window of opportunity, Pakistan has had the highest rates of urbanization in the world at 3%. Pakistan's youth bulge and fast-paced urbanization can be turned to good account with sound educational and social policies geared for meaningful and integrated professional and social development of Pakistani youth in particular and the nation in general. In this regard, it is encouraging to note that the current government has started a number of schemes and programs promoting the organizational and entrepreneurial talent and potential of young Pakistanis for innovation. I think I may not be wrong in jumping the gun and asserting that such measures are in the right direction. Sound educational and social policies will still be more effective and allow Pakistani youth to find meaningful avenues for the exploration of their innate and cultivated talents if there were to be integrated urban and planning development in Pakistan at promoting the mobility of people, especially the young, across the length and breadth of the country. A very interesting phenomenon has taken place, and it hasn't matured, which is small IT companies, and they're called in Pakistan software houses. The reason they're called houses is they are housed in a small house. They're 5, 10, 15 kids that have done software programming, and they're generating about $2-3 million of revenue without any venture capitalists. Obviously, they won't grow like that, but there's now hundreds of these, including doing mobile maps. So the yearn for innovation is there. We don't have venture capitalism. We don't have an entrepreneur spirit. Our banking system doesn't allow it. When they get that enabling environment, I think you'll see a rapid change. They're just on the verge of that tipping point. This entails the construction of new comprehensive urban growth centers in the country, since other countries in the region are also experiencing a not too different demographic and urban situation. There's a real possibility to facilitate regional mobility of talented through the creation of and promotion of coordinated regional growth-based urban integration. We have a very good example in India. The last time I visited Bangalore, I had the opportunity to sit with Azim Premji, the chairman of Wipro, and wonderfully he explained that how he got land a little outskirts of Bangalore, supported by the government, and the same kids that were educated in his foundation joined Wipro as professionals, and they don't leave. And his interested discussions with us was he wanted to invest in Pakistan for growing because they lacked some expertise. So here's an Indian billionaire, one of the legends of the IT industry, who was willing to partner with Pakistan, and then 2008 happened. This may provide the basis for convergence of policy and decision making in the region. The future already belongs to those countries, amongst others, that have created and developed physical and social infrastructures to support and foster the movement of people, services, and goods within their borders. In the last 10 years, a lot of meaningful groundwork that has been conducted in Pakistan to increase transportation, connectivity, and communication. The National Trade Corridor, you may have heard a bit about it. Our linkage with China right up to Gwadar is a significant endeavor. We've already started some mini projects in that endeavor. It's about a $30 billion investment that China is doing along with Pakistan. It's going to open up the region for a lot of trade, harmony, and yes, that underlying concept of peace will have to be played. In fact, just to share with you, it just came to mind, the military leadership also has offered that any FDI projects and investment coming into Pakistan, they'll provide full security. A new division will be set up just by that, because right now our police force is a bit weak on that. Both plans envision a prosperous South Asia through win-win cooperation in energy, trade, and industrial development, further enhanced by free circulation of talent in the region. So the Chinese are extremely important players. Our think tank deliberately made two nodes to start off our think tank, one with Beijing, the other with Washington, D.C. And I think we'll be working on London very, very quickly. The successful construction of the China-Pakistan economic corridor has a special potential to dovetail with various country-specific plans for regional integration and stands to benefit the immediate neighbors of Pakistan as well as the regions surrounding South Asia. The corridor will have its effects, the speedy construction of TAPI, SARC, ECO, Shanghai Cooperation. All these will provide a lot of linkages through this infrastructure/logistics energy corridor hub. I'm going to speed up a bit because I just realized I ran out of time. I'm going to go right to the conclusions. And talk a bit about the region itself. Bilateral trade between Pakistan and India is about 2.5 billion and can rise as much to 18 billion. So it's imperative that we get our acts together to do this. And I was just saying early on with Rahul, with our democratic transition last year and a majority in the parliament and India's election, it's a very, very strong possibilities to convince leadership. And we've given our thoughts to our Prime Minister that maybe a special commission be set up. Right now, they are working at Foreign Secretary levels, and Director Generals of the military ops regularly talk to each other. But we've suggested from our think tank that a commission would be set up to interact at the PM level and very, very regularly. That would show the seriousness of both sides. Pakistan-Iran trade stands at about 1.2 billion. That's also very less. We've done exercises with Iran. This has a potential of about 5 billion. The Pakistan-Afghanistan trades at about 2.5 to 3 billion. Two neighbors have already vowed to increase it to 5 billion by 2015. China and Pakistan are only 12 billion. That has a potential of 20 billion. Therefore, it's a potential for Pakistan to increase its regional trade only by approximately US $30 billion in the next 5 years. So for that, peace and stability is a must. Imagine the kind of prosperity the region can experience if possible increases in bilateral trade of other countries in region account are also taken in. I had some stats on what's happened in the the higher education, which shows evidence of our collaboration that we're having with other countries for a knowledge-based economy. And I'll share that some of that items in the QA because I've just ran out of time. I'm just going to do my quick summary right now. In conclusion, Pakistan is not a failing state. It is a fully functioning system, a responsible civilian leadership, an efficient bureaucracy, and a strong and professional army with a strong, independent judiciary and a vibrant media and civil society. Civil-military equation is more stable than what Western analysts think. Moreover, Pakistan has the confidence of a large Muslim nuclear state. The perception that Pakistan has the fastest growing nuclear arsenal has to be seen in the context of what is happening in the region, India's arms procurement and imports, etc. A genuine and realistic recognition of past mistakes, both by state and its institution, has to be deeply analyzed. Irrespective of the challenges and difficulties in this regard, a healthy national dialogue could prove very useful. Irrespective of the diverse mix of Eastern and Western outlooks and attitudes among Pakistan's population, the majority of the people realize the highly toxic effects of extremism and want to be properly led and guided back to a national discourse of moderation, progressiveness, and development. Pakistan's friends and partners, both official and unofficial, need to capitalize on this growing sentiment while showing a genuine understanding of Pakistan's problems and challenges. A recent survey by the Pew Research Center in Washington about the attitudes of Muslims of South Asia, Middle East, and North America about terrorism, religious extremism clearly shows that a vast majority of Pakistanis condemn extremism and suicide bombings and hold strong, unfavorable opinions about the Taliban. I've got that data, which I'll also pass on to Rahul. The Operation Zarb Azb, what you have seen recently in the media, that the military has gone out with all political backing, will not be limited to just the northern areas of Pakistan. It will also go into southern Punjab. Karachi has been an issue, and they are seriously looking at how to deal with Karachi because that's just not extremism. There's a lot of political mafias there. There's sectarian violence there. There's just simply militia gangs there, right? So that's a different story of how to tackle that with a paramilitary troop instead of just the military or the police. Indo-Pak relations are the linchpin for achieving real and lasting peace not only in South Asia but wider region encompassing Afghanistan, Iran, China, and Central Asia. Pakistan's friends and partners must strive and play a very active and positive role to help resolve core issues between the two countries. Instead of looking for a quick, media-savvy and short-term gains which are purely temporary, the hard slog would be indispensable. In the long term, this alone will bring about lasting and sustainable peace in the region. Moreover, China as a regional power and a growing global power has a vital and absolute role to play in the wider South and Central Asian regions. This stark reality must be recognized by Western powers, which should not sacrifice regional and world peace at the altar of their global ambitions. China's inclusive role must be readily recognized and accepted. Pakistan's biggest challenge will be how to insulate itself from the negative fallout of the war and conflict in Afghanistan. The forthcoming transition in Afghanistan will be a real game changer for the entire region. Pakistan, India, and Iran, as well as the US, China, and Russia, will have to rise above their narrow national and global interest and strive for lasting and sustainable peace within the country by encouraging national reconciliation and cooperation. I would like to also mention that our platform, the NUS Global Think Tank Network, research effort is based upon strong analytical and independent professional work to provide decision makers the options for prioritizing the action programs for national socio-economic development, including regional cooperation. In doing this, GTTN is building on multiple cooperative nodes, including strong linkages with academia and think tanks across the world. As I mentioned, started with Beijing and Washington. There is room for multiple win-win scenarios in the region which can equally benefit all regional players. Last but not least, Pakistan is a pivotal state in the region simply because it sits at the crossroads of Central Asia, South Asia, and the oil-rich Middle East. If Pakistan is stable, the whole region benefits. And my last message before our Q&A was, join us in and help to make it a progressive Pakistan. A negative force outside of Pakistan or any negative forces will continue having insight into what's actually happening, and physical ground realities will not be for anyone's good. But cooperating and helping bring a progressive Pakistan will actually benefit the entire region. And with that, I'd like to mention that with our neighbor of the Middle East being very close, China, India, Afghanistan, the socio-economic development, there's about cash reserves of $6 trillion just in that region. So peace and stability is a key. And I think the Pakistani nation, both state and society, have had a difficult time in understanding this, but we see a progressive Pakistan. So help us build it together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amir. I think you provided a very rich menu for discussion and for the Q&A session, for which we have just under 30 minutes. You also provided, I would say, a sort of optimistic perspective on Pakistan. At the IISS, I think we're sort of naturally comfortable with a sort of cautiously optimistic perspective, but the cautious part of it is imperative. And on that basis, let me start by asking you the first question. You've talked, I think you've given two important sort of factual statements. One is that 6 out of 10 Pakistanis have been born after the 1971 war, over 40, who are younger, who are about 40 years in that sense. You've also talked about the 6 power bases in Pakistan, which you described as the military, the political leadership, civilian bureaucracy, industry, the judiciary, and the media. Now, if you take these two facts together, it's really only in the media and possibly in industry to a certain extent where the demographic dividend that we just talked about in terms of the number of Pakistanis born after 71 war can actually have an impact. In terms of the military, the hierarchy, the age factor, the rank structure, the political leadership again, the civilian bureaucracy, it's very difficult for a younger group of Pakistanis to make an impact in these aspects of the power corridor or the power basis, with the exception, as I said, possibly I think definitely the media and possibly the industry. So overall, where does this leave us? I mean, is it really a tipping point? And is it really a demographic factor with policy implications for domestic and regional security issues of Pakistan, or is it yet to have an impact?
Okay. Very good question. I think you mentioned industry / corporate and the media, where the real influence would lie.
I think media definitely, industry, corporate possibly.
Yeah. But beyond 1970, if you really look at our civilian bureaucracy, you get to a level of, in Pakistani terms, we call a grade 19 or 20 officer, which is of a level of a director. So the policy support, which means at a senior level where there's a secretary who runs a ministry, and their implementation arm falls to that lot, and their mindset is changing. We sit in the middle of Islamabad's hub of knowledge, and we're starting to see this, that our Foreign Office, our Commerce Ministry, our Ministry of Finance, they've started talking different languages, and typically when you're on email or on the phone calls, you realize that this may not be the old school mentality. You physically meet these young professionals in the civil bureaucracy, they're below 45 years of age. So, and I allude this to knowledge. Pakistan has invested, we had a brain drain, but a lot of these civil servants went abroad. They not only got an education, they got a lot of experience, and now they've come back for policy making in the country. So civilian side, excellent. Military side, very interesting. at that age group, you're anywhere from a major, colonel, or a brigadier, right? And that's your heavy lot. Your hierarchy of the army in generals, I wouldn't count more than 20 to 30 very, very senior generals. So there's an education push there. NUST is a very good example where we have, and I'll be sharing with the audience as well, one of our peacekeeping institutes. We have young officers who are going on these peacekeeping missions. They're in uniform, but they're studying in the university at NUST because we've got the UN's mandate for building our Peace and Capability Institute within NUST, and they're working with civilians. Our National Defense Universities is offering their courses together with the civil bureaucracy. And they're going through a huge educational expansion. They go on international, so they get more exposure. So when we say that it may be limited to media and the corporate industry, we're finding evidence that it resides in civil bureaucracy as well as the military. The judiciary will need a lot of reform. We have a lot of young lawyers now that have returned from primarily the UK and the Americas that have started also a movement on a knowledge base, which is quite exciting. I won't say they're as mature as the civil and military, but both those bureaucracies are starting to listen to the younger sentiments, which are of progressive Pakistan.
Sure, excellent. Thank you. The floor is open for discussion, comments, questions. Let me take the gentleman there. If you could please identify yourself to speak.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the positive experience today. My name is Peter Asprey. I'm a member of the Institute. Could you comment a bit more on what actually is holding Karachi together as a city? What holds it together? In particular, touch on organised crime and the state of kidnapping.
Okay, so this is going to be my opinion with all the answers. I'm not going to toe either the police's version or the political parties that control the city. There's a very, very strong land mafia in Karachi, right? And there's a lot of sectarian groups that have evolved in the last 15 to 20 years. And the population has probably gone above 20 million. The physical land infrastructure obviously cannot hold this population. The youth that are convinced to join these rebel gangs, militias, and organized crime have a lot to do with the Karachi scenario. So if we look at the extremist element, and we've seen that in Newsweek, we've seen that in a lot of Western media, it's not as bad as the internal Karachi civilian issues that they're going through. The extremist elements did move in, so there's a large part of the Taliban that have, but that is not the threat to Karachi. I would probably come to the conclusion that because it's our economic engine, they're targeting the energy, banking, ICT sectors in Karachi deliberately because of unemployment of the youth, and realizing that our court systems are slow and the judiciary is not at its full potential. Human nature has taken over to say, okay, right now is the best time to commit a crime. Location, Karachi. So if we view it from a terrorism lens, no. And that's controllable. I mean, in my opinion, if you were to give the military a free hand in Karachi, you could get very, very quick results. But it's so complicated because you all know about the MQM. The PMLN has a very strong holding there. The PPP owns the province. The Taliban have recently shifted in. Everyone's armed. And so it's a very complex situation where the military wants the civilian leadership to take a decision, which is not coming. So Karachi is key. Peace in Karachi is key to all of this. I don't see an immediate future, to be quite honest, in Karachi. A solid solution that evolved in Karachi, I don't see that either. It'll hold. To be dead honest, 10, 15 killings per day, Pakistanis has just become used to it, right? And to be more honest, about 12 of those are probably robbery related. And they'll just come in the headline. Because we do deep analysis into who. The Taliban related are very little. Right? So anyone who wants to take a criminal activity kind of makes that their hub because it's very easy. They're taking advantage of the situation. Karachi will not break, and the reason for that is obviously the political alignment. I think you've got a very strong military base there. You've got very influential industrialists. Some of your top billionaires still physically reside there. You've got a very big intellectual hub there. So no one's going to let it just slide. But having said that, as you said, positive side, I think immediate solutions we don't see either, unless they have a very strict operation.
The gentleman there, yes.
Yeah, I'm Alex Carlyle. I'm a member of the House of Lords with a particular interest in counter-terrorism issues over a long period, and I've been to Pakistan twice in the last 21 months to look at such issues. Very conscious of the scale of terrorism in Pakistan, which is unknown to us here, happily, and I'm cognizant of the very high cost of terrorism, which you illustrated. I wonder why Pakistan has been so slow in the training of senior police officers in the protection of crime scenes and forensicating terrorist crime scenes so that proof can be given in court of the guilt of those involved. I'm astonished by the slowness of the Pakistan judiciary in coming to terms with the need for modern case management and a modern approach to crime scenes, such as not regarding DNA evidence as merely hearsay and then unacceptable. And I'm surprised that and these are all observations I made in the written articles about, I'm surprised by the slowness in providing security for judges and ensuring that judges in Pakistan are properly ticketed and trained. There being a lot of resistance to judicial training among the Pakistan judiciary, so that we can have quality terrorism trials in Pakistan, given that you have a legal profession and a judiciary that potentially at least is every bit as good as our own and anybody else's. And given, I hope, the assumption which you would accept, that, okay, there has to be a military surge maybe, but at the end of the day, the best way of dealing with terrorism is by the rule of law. So my question is, why has Pakistan evolved so slowly towards a rule of law situation dealing with counter-terrorism, which jurists around the world can embrace as being internationally compliant?
Alex, excellent question. All of your points, I absolutely agree. So you've done your research very, very well. I'll start with the police force. The political parties have infiltrated the civil bureaucracy to the extent of influencing every ministry, and our police force reports into the Ministry of Interior. Extremely competent policemen are sometimes not allocated to their roles because they won't toe the political line. Same is applicable in judges, right? So they've infiltrated there as well. Your question on why it's slow and why I call it a natural progression and see a positive side, this is not being accepted anymore. For example, the head of police in Karachi that started an operation during the last 8 months, and Karachi had an operation to clean up. There was a lot of political interference from both, not just the MQM, but also the PPP, the predominant party of Sindh, and he was asked to resign. And it was backed up by the parliament's opposition that he should stay because he was cleaning up an operation. Until we don't evolve and mature our political maturity, your civil bureaucracy will be hostage to their demands, right? And the police comes right under that. And in the police, if you do take up these senior appointments, and you go along with the political parties, you actually become extremely wealthy in Pakistan, to be quite honest. So, and as far as judges, I'll reserve my comments on that. They're a little strong. Absolutely, some of the courts, they did take quick decisions, right decision, evidence-based decisions. Unfortunately, they were let go, which has hurt Pakistan significantly. And I can give evidence of hundreds of terrorists that were actually let go. So, if you're asking whether the courts worked, yes. What was the intention of letting criminals released? That I can't answer for you. And what's the hope is that this will not be accepted anymore. Let me give you another example. We have probably the second largest political party right now, PTI. And I do, although you may disagree with Imran Khan's strategy, one thing he's certain on, and he's just saying, I want a judicial probe on the election. Simple as that. And this is where some of the political bigwigs in the country have influence on these governments, on the civil bureaucracy, and includes the police. Right? So he has started the right mindset. Who's backing him? From professionals to rural sector farmers to the youth to industrialists. So you can't, everyone calls it a youth party. It's actually not just a youth party. He's got the rural sector population with him. He's got industrialists with him. He's got the professionals with him. So they're demanding now questions which were never asked in the country before. I'll take a verbiage which some of you may understand. It's called Sardar mentality. Sardar was a big landlord that controlled our rural sector, and it existed in India. That mentality is diminishing at a very high rate in Pakistan now. And Rahul started, what is this change, this youth change? Because of the knowledge base and the realization that Pakistan's growth will not take place until we address the socio-economic indicators and law and order. That's the two strategic priorities. Everything else will be a byproduct. It's only positive after that. So the police and the courts were embarrassed to say that haven't performed their job. Solutions, many. I think that's something that our think tank's actually working on this paper. We're calling it a governance paper for all civil reforms.
Let me just follow up on this. I mean, what is your sense? I mean, are things getting better or are they getting worse on these issues? I mean, one of the things that when we were in Islamabad recently, we came across was this question about evidence and concerns expressed by the Pakistani government officials that one of the reasons for the very low conviction rate in terms of terror attacks is that no one wants to give evidence. I mean, the witnesses refuse to give evidence in the trial because they fear they will be targeted. There's no witness protection.
That's a very good point, because there is a new witness protection
scheme there is.
It's being introduced, but it's barely being implemented.
Correct.
Okay, so I mean, so in a way, just putting these two sort of things together, is it getting better or is it getting worse? I mean, I don't have opinion to it, but it's not.
It'll get better.
Okay. Kiran, yes.
Thank you so much for such a comprehensive talk. My concern is electoral reform in Pakistan. That is, considering that we have a kind of very vulnerable democratic transition, do you think that in the coming cycles, if the PMLN government is able to complete its first term successfully, inshallah it will, and of course the subsequent government, do you think that the next elections are going to be, are we going to be having diaspora included in elections? Is it going to be a much more of a kind of legitimate kind of electoral process? Some more comments on that.
We're talking in 4 years from now.
Yes.
The last.
Let me two more questions because we've got a list of 5 other people. So we got. Let me take Vipul. You identify.
IIS member Vipul Thakur. First of all, I return your greetings. Walaikum salam. I would quote Aisha Siddiqa who is internationally respected Pakistani analyst and who has written a book on Pakistan's army. He has just stated that Pakistan's army's policy of good Taliban and bad Taliban still continue because Pakistan only finds Pakistan Taliban, that is Pakistan. But suppose Afghan Taliban, Afghanis, LET and others. One question arises, why doesn't Pakistan get on with trial of LET terrorists who carried out attack in Mumbai if it has got really independent judiciary? And just one small point on
that's the question. So let's move on to Econo Bedi.
Sir, I'll just take on your two statements and having a very crisp question. You said Pakistan military is now fully supportive of democracy and are taking a back seat in decision. And subsequently, you said when it came to FDIs, you said now military says that it would provide security to the FDI companies investing. So the question is, why should it be military? Why should it be government providing security? Or should we say that two are somewhat still synonymous?
And then we have another batch.
Sure. I'll take yours, your fresh one. The security comfort level, and we have very large American investors in the country and Chinese, and their comfort level with military security is much more than the civilian police setup. So when you're investing in Pakistan, you're putting up, for example, an industrial state, right, as the Chinese have done, as the Americans have done. And it relates to Alex's question on our police force training you also asked about, are not advanced, don't have advanced training in counterterrorism activities. So if rogue elements are to plan something against FDI, foreigners basically, and these are extremist groups that, so-called extremist groups that are targeting foreigners in the country, then the best available services of the armed forces, because they are dealing with that. And this was not an offer, this was acceptance by the army asked by the civilian government. So remember, I also made a statement that in state helping and assisting state institutions, so foreign direct investment, very important, the military in response to civil aid will do whatever it takes, right? If the police force can handle it, absolutely no issue. Why should the Pakistan Army be involved in providing security to investors? It's quite silly if you actually think of it, right? But are they trained adequately that we have billions of dollars investment coming in and the police can handle it? It's going to hurt the country. They are contemplating a paramilitary force that may be able to deal with these, and an army should not be involved in such. But remember one thing, the Pakistan Army, and this is my own opinion, I've studied all the institutions, it's probably your strongest institution in the country, right? And what I mean on strongest institution for merit-based and their simple objectives and goals and implementation. They're by far outstanding. They deliver what is asked. I'll address in relation to that question about LET as well. Karen, coming to your question on electoral reforms. Last election, there was an investment proposal made to include technology, which means thumbprint and even retina. Retina is a little more expensive. And also the concept of auditing the votes. For example, the large KPMGs, PricewaterhouseCoopers and stuff, getting professionals involved even in that, because the way the election commission set it up, there were a lot of holes that have been brought out after the elections. So excellent learning curve. The PTI, along with some other political parties, have written some white papers that I'll have access to. Our think tank is also involved with a higher one on governance. So we're working with Germany's Heidelberg University's South Asia Institute, learning from the German electoral reforms and giving our recommendation to the parliament. So my answer would be, after 4 years, inshallah, you would have a free and fair election, right? But introducing technology would be key to that. Professionals in technology. Sorry, Thakur Sir?
tackle.
Yeah. Aisha Sadiq's book, Military Ink, you're referring to? You mentioned.
Well, I mentioned, I quoted Aisha Siddiqa, that Pakistan's army's policy of good Taliban and bad Taliban still continues.
Which year was that? I mean, the question is it?
And if it has independent judiciary, why doesn't it get on with NAT trial? Who might take Mumbai?
I don't think I'm qualified to answer that, to be quite honest. And the reason I say it, I have a very strong opinion. I don't want to say it at this forum. Yeah, the reason, sir, is there's a lot of judicial involvement in that, right? The judicial system, like I answered to Alex, is going through an evolution. So when you're not a subject matter expert, and to speak on behalf of them, I wouldn't be able to. As far as the why they even haven't started it would be a concern, definitely. What's the process, underlying idea of the delay, I wouldn't know at this point.
Now, let me take the last three questions, the last four questions in the next 5 minutes. We can go a few minutes beyond time. In the order that I have the people who want to ask questions. Yes, the gentleman will be very patient with me. Yes.
Yeah, hi, so Nick Easton from M&T Saatchi. I run our agency in Islamabad and Karachi. A lot of what we've been talking about here obviously depends on investments. The economic reforms and economic stability of Pakistan remains in question, even despite the very large loans given by both the international community and individual nations over the last 6 to 8 months. Do you think this current government have it within them to be able to conduct the necessary economic reforms to be able to pay for things like the Karachi attack, the Karachi security, or indeed the North Waziristan security operation at the moment?
Shazadi.
I just want to pick up on the point that Alex Carlile raised. The most grotesque example for me about political interference in the police at the operational level was the incident with Gulubat, which is now on YouTube, which everybody's seen. But in addition to that, the whole issue of, I mean, you talked about the determined fight against terrorism and military response. But of course, the real issue, in my view, is rooting out extremist attitudes. That's not just in mosques and madrasas, but actually in the police force as well. And linking that up with the point that Alex made about the judiciary, I mean, I'm delighted to hear what you said about the young lawyers, perhaps taking the lead on this, but for many, many years, I have been advocating the mandatory training of lawyers and judges on ethics, which Pakistan, to my knowledge, still doesn't have. There also, of course, needs to be some focus on having an independent judicial appointments commission so that judges can be appointed on merit rather than on seniority. I don't know whether that is being addressed.
Well, we're going to take these two questions, then I'll come to the last two separately. So
I didn't totally understand your question. You're saying the investment coming in, the government will be able to take care of the enabling environment to bring in that investment and repay the loans?
Well, that's one component of the economic reforms required, but I mean, clearly an awful lot more money can be generated internally in Pakistan to pay for all the varying things like infrastructure or security operations to create the stability we're talking about.
So sorry, what's your exact question then?
Is the government able to do those economic reforms?
The foreign policy related to the investment policy that they're currently implementing, in my opinion, will take about at least a year to mature. And here's the reason why. Is a lot of the investment flow slowed down due to the negotiations that were going on the issue of extremism. Soon as the operation was announced, for example, we have delegations visiting Islamabad, and we have the BOI in Islamabad, Board of Investment. A lot of the delegation had stopped coming to the country. After the operation started, our Karachi Stock Exchange index actually went up, and we got positive indicators from some of the large investment houses. Just to give you an example, Pakistan Petroleum Limited, PPPL, one of the largest oil giants in the country, its initial offering was in, and a bunch of international investors picked it up on the first day. So one positive indicator was that the success of the military operations to curb terrorism in relation to economic growth, I feel that the consensus in the parliament has actually accepted that this is the right strategy. And there's very few voices against that. We will actually see results, like I said, in a year. I think 3 months, 6 months, we'll actually see the benefits of that. My own analysis, because I am a venture capitalist myself, is it's a very convincing argument to bring in FDI into Pakistan, but the first question they ask is security, right? So that is being addressed right now. And generating enough resources to provide that security are there in Pakistan.
You want to follow up to Shahzadi's question or point, or
Yes. I think the key aspect of your question is really the training of the judges, mandatory, and independency of them. Again, I think my answer is related to the influence the political parties have on them. And there's not just a ruling political party. All political parties in Pakistan's history have that. That will be the success. I think what we could do is have a very strong proposal. I don't know what mechanism you used when you offered this type of training. It would be received very well in the government, as long as the associated think tanks in Islamabad to explore such a avenue. And certainly the lawyers would really accept it, right? So that's one thing that we can offer. Secondly, rooting out the extremist attitudes, that's a natural evolution that's taking place in Pakistan. And I refer to the Sadar mentality, that's where it actually starts. So it's not just the extremism related to faith, it's the extremism related to the Gulubad scenario. Can you get away with a crime, basically? Can you be a bully? Pakistan's evolution in that, I also, again, see an evolution that will take time on that. It's not going to be a quick fix. Your parliament, I don't know the exact stats, and I'll get you them later, but your parliament still invites majority the landlord class, and most of them are not educated. So your sitting parliament has that attitude sitting there, and they're responsible for your policies. So until they don't take those reformative steps themselves, which one answer is yes, let's start land reforms, that's a very big strategy. But if it starts taking place with that knowledge base, another thing has happened which I see positive. You've got now about 25 MNAs, members of the National Assembly, that are less than about, I think, 40 years of age, which first election ever, we've got the highest youth parliamentarians coming in. So they're starting to influence that lot as well. So it's an evolution, no quick fix.
Okay, let's have the last two questions. The gentleman, I think, yes, I think, did you put your hand up? You did, okay, yes, please. Could you identify yourself?
Yeah, my name is Baran Vyas. I'm a lead South Asia analyst for Risk Advisory Group. I was hoping you would clarify on I think the approach you made was the military is assisting in the institution strengthening. How would you try to argue that point in relation to the recent tensions with GOTV and the media program?
Okay, and the last question, Brigadier Zahir Kazmi, IISS.
I only have a small comment. It was regarding Pakistan's so-called inability to deal with one type of militants and not the others, or do what it can across the border. While I think if we have been following statements just before Operation Zarb-e-Azb was launched, and the Chief of Army Staff statement, and the Director General ISPR statement, they were very clear, and this is what is happening on ground as well, that there is no discrimination between good or bad Taliban. They are dealing with them all across the board. And in your presentation, you did mention that it's not an operation which is limited to a geographical entity as such. That's one. The second is that beyond the borders, Pakistan does respect the international borders. That's one. So what Pakistan can do for itself within its country, it is ready to cooperate with others. And one of the issues for Pakistan is that the Taliban leadership continues to reside in the neighboring country. So Pakistan can, and that's why Pakistan's repeated iteration that there has to be a regional solution to this, and Pakistan is doing what it can at best. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Your question on geo issue it's actually quite complex. As a role of the two most powerful, the parliament and the military, for national development and cohesiveness, the military will do what it takes to build institutions. A conflict within a media group is a totally separate issue, right? On that, the military took a strong stance, and the reason for that stance, on the evidence that's been provided so far, is that they felt the group was deliberately targeting sections of the armed forces, not just the intelligence, right? And not just in this one incident. So this had been going on for many years, to the extent that I was actually out of the country when it happened, but we were told that the coverage on a breaking news channel showing a very senior official's picture with his name and accusations for over 8 to 10 hours live. The army didn't shut it down. They could have taken a stance and been very strict and shut it down that right day. They went to the courts, and the courts took a decision. There's not just this channel. Various other channels have played these types of political games. Many are owned by political families. Many are owned by industrial groups that have political backing. That's why it's a little more complex. But as far as the military helping the security, the infrastructure, engineering, IDPs, disaster management, healthcare, like the army has hospitals all around the country. Civilians are allowed to go to it. Those are for the state. As far as a rift between a certain element in the media and the army will be dealt through the courts, and it is being still dealt through the court. The army still has not used its weight to totally squash that issue. Geo, I think, is up and running again. I believe so. And then another channel was shut down, which was actually pro-military. So if you see what the judiciary is playing with, there's one channel that was pro-military, one was anti. Both were shut down.
If I could come back, what the whole incident raised was the question of whether the media can actually criticize the military.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Can they? Openly?
Openly.
Well, we must end now the formal part of the session. As I thought it would be, we've had a very rich discussion of various issues and points that Amar has brought to the table this afternoon. And I'm also very impressed that no one has left the room straight after an hour, which is very unusual because all of us have different things to do. But obviously, everyone wants to stay back to hear.
There's a race there today as well.
Oh, they can't leave the office.
Yeah.
They can't leave the building.
Unless they're on bikes themselves. Huh?
Okay, can't leave the building there. But I'd like to just formally thank you for taking the time and coming here and speaking to us. And I'd like all of you to join me in thanking our boss.